I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, some rather striking news being made by American Jewish leaders after their meeting with the heads of Arab Emirate countries. The Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations had a 4-day visit to Dubai and Abu Dhabi. And the headlines read, US Jewish leaders gush about visit to, quote, tolerant, united Arab Emirates. And the storyline contends that Arab Emirates are increasingly interested in having relationships with the State of Israel. You may remember that each year the President's Conference holds its annual leadership mission in Jerusalem, and before its annual mission, the conference office visits some places of importance to the State of Israel and world Jewry. So it's not only interesting that the conference chose Arab Emirates this year, it's significant that there seems to be such a positive message coming out of their visit, and one that suggests a real change in attitude and perhaps policy in the Arab world regarding the Jewish state of Israel. Well, here to give us more about the trip to Dubai and Abu Dhabi is the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of major American Jewish organizations. You know him very well here from JBS, if not from the myriad other works he does on behalf of the State of Israel and world Jewry, Malcolm Hoenlein. Malcolm, welcome home and welcome back to JBS.
Thank you. It's great to be with you as always, and we missed you. And you're right, there's a lot to report and discuss.
Okay. First of all, I assume you only went to Dubai and Abu Dhabi because, Malcolm, you were invited. Who invited the conference, and what were the circumstances of that invitation?
So, as you know, we visit many Arab countries throughout the year. We do not publicize those visits. We often go in small groups, myself, or I go with a few other leaders so that we can open doors, develop relationships, address critical issues, not as emissaries of the government of Israel, the government of the United States, but as representatives of the community. We make that very clear, and we had been to the UAE before, a year ago. A few of us went, and in fact, we were there even before that, a number of years ago. And we visited other Gulf countries in recent months. And the UAE is a critical country. If you look at the map, its geopolitical position, it's an ally of the United States. It is close to Saudi Arabia. It's part of the anti-Iranian coalition. It's really a critical country, and we've been in discussion with them for some time. In fact, we looked at a trip a couple of years ago, which we couldn't do. So this year we went, but we started with a delegation expected to be, as every year, about 40 people who go on the pre-mission. And we had 40 people an hour after the notice went out, and 50 within 2, and 60, and then ended up with 70 after pressing the UAE to increase the number, and they were wonderful hosts to us. We had kosher food the whole week. They koshered one of the top restaurants right in the Dubai Mall next to the fountains, and we sat there as the dancing waters and food made from scratch. We had mashgiach from South Africa. Everything, and in the main hotel we stayed in the Fairmount, they took one of the biggest kitchens and they gave it over to them for the week to use. And so we had all fresh food all week, kosher, certified kosher, which of course is something unique there.
Yes.
And we toured. We got to see important sites, but most of all, we had very serious meetings with the top leadership in the UAE over the course of the almost 4 days we were there, 3.5 days, and then we stopped in Amman and met the regent because the king was out, so his brother met with us and in the palace, and we had a very good meeting there, and then went on.
Don't jump ahead of me. I first want to know, in terms of the meetings you had in Dubai, what surprised you most? Again, this was not your first contact with the Emirates, but as you look back on it, did something at some moment, did you say to yourself, I feel there's something different going on here, something surprises me? What was it, Malcolm?
Well, I would say there were several things that we heard people. We saw the willingness to openly engage with 70 people. You can't hide them. And at times, even the reaction, when people went on the street, we didn't wear yarmulkes, but in the hotel itself, people would come from the meal, wouldn't take it off, and no reaction amongst the people, the Arabs in the hotels at all. Negative reaction, I mean. Quite the opposite. They were very solicitous of the group, and also the mention of Israel by ministers openly talking about it, the emphasis on tolerance. We met the minister of tolerance, in fact, and he even hosted us in his home in this palatial setting, but it was quite remarkable, the emphasis that they put on fighting extremism. Obviously, Iran is an expression of that, but more about extremism within Islam. And that emphasis we did not see as much and as strongly in the past. The stress on the U.S. relationship, the concerns about Iran and Turkey, much more explicit, and recognizing, as many others don't, that there's a parallel danger. And looking at it in a regional context, not just in the immediate security of the UAE. They obviously are very concerned and pushing for the relationship with Saudi Arabia and America, and emphasis on the need to stand up to some of these diabolical forces that are arranging. And they are talking about changing textbooks. They're talking about other steps to liberalize the role of women, and these are all cumulative measures which they hope will bring about change within society.
Yes. Any idea, Malcolm, what is fueling this change, both in attitude and in policy? As you say, this wouldn't have been the same 5 years ago. What's your instinct?
Right.
What's driving it?
Well, the common enemy, the recognition that Israel is a source of stability, not instability. They want to see the Palestinian issue resolved, although they're running out of patience with the Palestinians. They talk about the, kleptocracy, the stealing of money, the fact that all the aid they give doesn't reach the people. But they know that in their streets this is an emotional issue yet. But they want to see this obstacle removed so that they can be more open in their relationship with Israel, because they see that they have a lot to benefit from Israeli technology, from Israel's security, and some of the interchanges that go on secretly could be more open. But it's not going to be an immediate shift. Nobody should anticipate that this is going to be a revolution in attitude. It's going to be an evolution, because people have been indoctrinated, and there's, certainly in most of the Arab countries, a lot of anti-Israel feeling. I think less so maybe in the UAE, but there is still that, resonance of hostility, which will be ameliorated if there's a peace process or if there's some progress. But at the same time, they look at the world, and they look at the region, and they say, who can they rely on? And the answer obviously points very much that Israel is on the same page with them, that Israel has resources that can benefit them, and that they face very strong opposition from, whether it's Iran and Turkey and the Islamic State, the other militant extremist terrorist organizations.
Malcolm, do you worry that this is in some way an alliance of convenience and not of an honest shifting? In other words, as long as there is a common threat, are the Emirates going to be more open to the president's conference and to Jews wearing yarmulkes in the street or in the hotel, and to saying sort of less harsh things about Israel? But if the threat were ever removed, do you worry it would revert to the same kind of hostility and attempt to, in essence, destroy Israel that has been at the heart, the essence of the Arab world since before 1947?
Absolutely. Of course, this is a concern we have, that it's not just a temporary marriage of convenience or of the interests, and that's part of the reason we go, is to look at ways to expand the basis for the commonality of interests with U.S., with Israel, with in terms of the values, in terms of our role in helping to facilitate wherever we can. We visited the NYU campus where there are Jewish students, and they are allowed to freely practice and freely think. There aren't many. There's not a Hillel there, but they did have a Shabbaton a week ago, 2 weeks ago. They have some activities.
That sounds amazing.
Students.
That's amazing, Malcolm.
But I realize in all of these countries, it can change. A bullet can change it. A massive development, uprising of the people there, even in Egypt, even in UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in any of these countries, it's all possible, and it can be possible for good if Khamenei is overthrown, or if Iran gets changed, and the people come back to power who don't want to see this extremism and don't want to see a regime like they have. That will change it to the better, and all these countries will and Israel, and I think ultimately can have a very positive relationship. We can change the world. In the meantime, what I see is that we're seeing the Sykes-Picot period of the 20s being relived, except it's not Britain and France redrawing the Middle East, it's Turkey and Iran. Mm-hmm. And if you look at their expansionism, then you understand the concern. Mm-hmm. If you look at the bases they're building in Somalia, in the Sudan, Iran and Turkey, let alone Russia, building in the Sudan, building in Syria, elsewhere, expanding its footprint in the region. But these two, one trying to recreate the Ottoman Empire, one trying to create a Persian Empire. And they are succeeding. They are moving ahead with the war in the Houthis, in Iran's presence in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, dominance in those countries, and their efforts in Africa and South America, etc. And Turkey building 17,000 mosques around the world, building its influence in Europe, within Europe, bases in Afghanistan. Both are in Qatar. When you look at the map, you see there's a transformation going on. So your question is very relevant. One can't predict what tomorrow will bring. Yes. So you have to try to solidify what we have today, build the channels and some of the shock absorbers that will hopefully change what will happen in the future.
Very well said. Malcolm, any pushback on President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel?
I would say less pushback than concern, not about doing it, but about how it's done, because it excites people, they say. Most of them said they don't care where the embassy is. It's just that don't do it in a provocative way or, reaction. But on the other hand, I think that many respect the fact that President Trump is standing up for a friend, a commitment to a friend. They often felt that America was withdrawing, and still some sentiment about that. But this public demonstrations, and I think it reinforces the confidence of the Arab states when they see that America stands by Israel. Then they have hope that they will stand by them, and they believe that if America doesn't stand by Israel, they have no chance.
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating reality. Look, I saw you raise the issue with them of the Israeli sort of a judo team that was forbidden to raise the Israeli flag or to play Israel's national anthem, Hatikva, during an international competition in Abu Dhabi. What was their response?
Well, obviously we raised it, and we're very more concerned about the Expo 2020 and the role that Israel will play, whether Israel gets a formal invitation to participate fully. It's going to be a big worldwide event in Dubai, and I would say that they heard our concerns very well and listened to it, acknowledged it. I think that we will see. I am very hopeful that we will see a positive response to that, and we lodged our complaints about what happened there. I mean, they saw allowing Israel to participate was a step in the right direction, but they thought it would be. I think some of them felt it was a provocation to play the anthem. That was not the case, and it should not have been the case.
Yes.
And that shows that we have a lot of work to do,
yes.
But we have to continue to do it. And whether it's, the anti-Semitic titles, whether it's textbooks, whether it's all these things that we have to continue to press all of the countries in the region with whom we have relations.
What about the geopolitical scene in terms of America and Russia being now centered around the fight against ISIS, Russian presence in Syria? Does any of this bother those with whom you spoke? And again, as you mentioned this briefly, but what's their attitude towards Islamic fundamentalism?
Okay, so those are a couple of important issues. One is the role of Russia, which is seeking to challenge the United States, building on virtually minimal investment, but translating that into a dominant role in Syria. And we see now their stealth fighters are there. We know they have the advanced missile defense system. They are building bases there, naval and Air Force base. As I said, also we know that they're doing so in the Sudan, and they want to increase their footprint. They want to be able to challenge the United States, and we're seeing them coming into sharp contrast in Syria. A lot of countries are still skeptical of Russia. They still see it as a communist country. And remember that era. Russia is doing more to court them. And the very fact that the Syrian negotiations are between Iran, Turkey, and Russia, not the United States, is something that they note and would like to see the United States be the more dominant, important player. So Russia's increasing aggressiveness there and elsewhere. It's all based on an economy that's not larger than Italy's, and they have minimal real physical presence. But Putin has shrewdly translated that into a very important and, if not dominant, role at times. In terms of Islamic fundamentalism, it is a major motivating concern. They see it as a threat to their regimes. They see it as a threat to their countries, societies, the values, and they're moving away from some of the more restrictive laws. You saw that in Saudi Arabia. They removed some of the clothing restrictions. And, these may not seem like much in the West, but they are really major developments. And more we saw in the street women walking around in Western clothing, and nobody harasses them, whatever. Certainly in UAE, women drive, and women have women ministers that we met who play very important roles in the government there. So Islamic fundamentalism, whether manifested in the IS, in an organized terrorist group, or in the ideologies that Iran and others are promulgating, are a top priority, I would say, for all of these regimes.
Fascinating. All right, Malcolm, talk to me about one or two more general issues. Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing corruption charges which threaten to embroil him in some kind of domestic political battle. And my understanding is the Prime Minister actually addressed the President's conference during your meeting in Israel. Can you tell us what his mood was and how did he seem?
Well, we heard from every key minister, and the President to the Speaker of the Knesset. Everybody came, or we went to visit them, and then had an event with the Prime Minister at dinner where he came. And I give you the setting because he gave a 35-minute address with slides, well prepared, never mentioned any of the side issues of the investigations, but talked about substantive accomplishments, the goals, the future vision. It was a very powerful presentation, but because of the fact that he didn't talk about the potential indictments or the charges, he got less coverage than he would have had he focused on it. But he did end by saying, "I look forward to seeing you here next year in Jerusalem,"
yes.
Which, of course, that the press picked up on.
Yes.
He looked, although he was confident. He gave, as I said, a very good presentation. He had other meetings that we know where he met with small groups, larger groups. Obviously, this has to weigh heavily on him. There's no way that it doesn't.
Yes.
But I think that he's able to compartmentalize these things, and he's coming here to the United States in a couple of days, and we will see again a very strong Netanyahu who will focus on the issues.
Okay, you're not a columnist. You represent American Jewry and in some way world Jewry. So it's only so fair to ask you to comment. But do you want to indicate all what you make of these charges, Malcolm, which seem to center on the Prime Minister taking payoffs in cigars and champagne in return for political favors? How do you look at this in the perspective of, you've seen other prime ministers, presidents of Israel, facing all kinds of really serious charges. What's your sense of what's going on here?
Right. Well, there are numerous cases, and as many people said to us, the feeling of a lynching atmosphere, that some complain in the United States as well, that the media just can make charges and there's no way to rectify or counter the charges once they put it out, regardless. The many made fun of the champagne and cigar charges, by standards set here and by others. It's a minimal amount of money, and the real test is, can they show a quid pro quo?
Yes.
Bribery means that you got something for it, and so far that hasn't been demonstrated. Some feel that charge, the latest, the Bezek charges, people feel has more, but again, that was true of the initial thrust of each of the cases, and some of them have not, with the submarine case, others we see have not even been processed or have been dropped. So we'll have to see. I think he's entitled to his day in court. He's entitled not to be convicted in the headlines. Obviously, people are talking about an election coming up. There could be a snap election because in Israel, when you have elections, all investigations, everything freezes. And then he would have a new mandate. Others say that he should step down, some of the other political leaders. But there's no real, and all the polls show, that there's no single person who people see as a successor, not within and not without, that he is still the strongest candidate. And one poll this past week said that he would get 28 seats if elections were held now. So while there are other contenders, circling around, I think that right now Netanyahu politically may be in a strong position. We have to see what the legal consequences are of these investigations.
Okay. Now, I already asked you about how leaders in Dubai and Abu Dhabi seem to feel about President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem and his plans to move the U.S. Embassy to Israel's capital city. In general, Malcolm, is this an issue of contention inside Israel as you saw it?
No.
Okay.
There's a broad consensus amongst all the parties supporting it. I did not hear any opposition to it. I don't think anybody would express that kind of opposition. Again, everybody is concerned about what kind of repercussions there are. But, the fact is that when the president went to the Kotel, the Western Wall, and put on a yarmulke and said Psalms and declared it a Jewish holy site, that was as bold a move as the question of the embassy, because on the ground so far nothing has changed, even though we hear that maybe for Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day, they will already have a location, either starting it or a facility that they can move in temporarily. But the fact is that there was no demonstrations, no protestations anywhere in the Arab world when the president went to the wall and did what he did and declared it a Jewish holy site after all the UNESCO and others, denigrating the Jewish connection, the Christian connection to the Temple Mount, the Western Wall. And it shows that, they're incited to protest. For all the years, they did not make it a holy place. All the years that Jordan had it. So the history belies some of the protests that go on now. I'm not saying that Muslims shouldn't have a right and Arabs don't have a claim, to be able to go to their holy places, and something that Israel has never, ever indicated it would not fully implement, as well as for Christians. But the overreaction, the cries that Abbas engages in, a specialist in, Al-Aqsa's under siege. He knows that will immediately evoke riotous reactions and people take to the street because of it, and when it wasn't true. And you can go and see the pictures and see that it's not true. The cams on the Kotel on the Temple Mount, and yet you can incite people, and tens of thousands will then storm, and you end up with people getting shot and killed. Because they exploit these situations. He doesn't care about the deaths of the innocent in this case as a result of it. So I would say that if it's done right with sensitivity, there's no reason why an embassy in Western Jerusalem, and the president has said it doesn't preclude whatever arrangement they make, whatever borders they make. He wasn't prejudging it. He was simply saying that this is a truth, a right that has to be, an injustice has to be corrected. It's the right thing to do, he keeps saying, and he is doing it. And that, I think, again, need not evoke a negative response, but maybe build confidence that people can count on the president's word and commitments to them as well.
Okay. It's interesting to hear that your experience in Israel is this is not an issue of contention. I don't hear it anymore being an issue of contention within the United States Congress. Malcolm, what about organizations here in America, on the American Jewish scene? Your sense about how American Jewry is or is not continue to be upset by Donald Trump's formal recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. How are American Jews reacting as far as you can tell?
Well, there are some who are upset with the president, but I don't think that there are many, if any, today who opposed the recognition. Some made initial comments, but backtracked. I think that there is a broad consensus, even if not on maybe in the fringe, but certainly a broad consensus supporting it.
You do not feel that there are strong voices on the Jewish left, I'm talking about organizational, institutional voices, which are still upset with this move?
I think that the president's commitment to moving the peace process forward, to coming up with a proposal, shows his commitment will ameliorate some of those concerns. They don't want to prejudge. But it's not prejudging. This is just simply living up to what is American law. It was enacted in 1995, and the President's Conference across the board supported it, and we support the implementation of it. And it's not. It shouldn't even be a question about are there some groups on the extremes that may oppose the decision? Yes, but that does not reflect what I said, which is that there is a strong consensus of support for the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital, a reality that they're simply acknowledging, and beginning to move the embassy.
I love the way you say it. I always love talking to you. I try to reach you all the time, Malcolm, but sometimes you're not available. I love it when you are available. I will continue to chase you. I want you to get back on American time, and soon we will sit together face to face. You know, I love you, and you do fabulous work for all of us. Thank you, Malcolm, very much.
Thank you very much, and always a pleasure to be with you.
Be well. Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. And obviously, any positive movement in any part of the Arab world which moves countries closer to the state of Israel is good for Israel and for prospects for peaceful coexistence in the Middle East. It's also enlightening to hear that the issue of Jerusalem seems more important to some American Jews than it does to the Arab world. It's a lesson we should learn very well from. My thanks as always to our director Sloan Copeland, production coordinator Serge Goldberg, JBS's associate director Dara Golub, editors John McDevitt and Cordelia Saporin, and to the producer of In the News, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.